Imagine a time when Marvel was still experimenting with its identity. Before billion-dollar blockbusters and cinematic universes, there were crude yet daring cartoons that introduced superheroes to television audiences for the first time. Some thrilled young viewers, while others quietly vanished under pressure from censors and critics. Today, we uncover 16 forgotten Marvel cartoons from the 1960s that would never air the same way again. Number 16. The Marvel Superheroes, 1966. It began as Marvel's first true leap into animation. The Marvel Superheroes was not one show, but 5 miniseries stitched together, featuring Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, The Incredible Hulk, and Namor the Submariner. Each segment reused artwork directly from comic panels, giving it a strange motion comic look that fascinated children but infuriated critics. The limited movement and recycled poses became both its charm and its curse. At first, it was celebrated for bringing Marvel's heroes to life on television at all. The voices boomed with melodrama, and the narration dripped with pulp intensity. But here's where it gets complicated. Parents complained about the level of violence. Networks grew uneasy about Cold War undertones in episodes where heroes fought enemies too similar to real-world communists. Behind the scenes, the production schedule was brutal. Animators raced to meet deadlines using the bare minimum of frames per scene. Some episodes were completed in under a week, leading to continuity errors and mismatched audio. When reruns began years later, the show was mocked for its crude style, but fans defended it as the birth of Marvel animation. Though its episodes disappeared from syndication by the early 70s, fragments survive on fan recordings and restored DVD sets. The legacy of the Marvel superheroes reminds us that even rough beginnings can ignite an empire. Number 15. Spider-Man, 1967. Few opening themes are as unforgettable as the one that began Spider-Man's 1967 cartoon. Swinging through a painted skyline, the wall crawler captured children's imaginations instantly. This series, produced by Grant Trey Lawrence Animation and later Ralph Bakshi, became one of the decade's most daring experiments in atmosphere and tone. At first, it was considered wholesome fun, yet early episodes contained unsettling moments. The show's backgrounds grew darker each season until Manhattan looked more like a haunted labyrinth than a city of hope. Bakshi used abstract art to mask budget cuts, painting entire sequences with minimal motion but deep psychological tension. Parents complained that episodes felt too eerie for children, and some stations pulled the later seasons. Production chaos defined the show. Grant Trey Lawrence went bankrupt mid-season, forcing Bakshi to recycle earlier footage and even reuse villains under new names. Marvel's own executives disapproved of the show's grim direction, but could not stop it. Decades later, Spider-Man became a cult classic, loved precisely for its haunting style and jazz noir score. Internet culture revived its fame through countless memes, yet few remember the censorship struggles that nearly erased it. The series proved that even within limitation, creativity could weave its own kind of web. Number 14. Fantastic Four, 1967. The Fantastic Four cartoon arrived at the height of Marvel's comic success, but its television adaptation struggled under network caution. Hanna-Barbera produced it, hoping to blend superhero adventure with family comedy. The result was ambitious, yet oddly sanitized. Each episode followed Reed Sue Johnny and Ben battling cosmic threats while maintaining a cheerful domestic tone. Villains like Dr. Doom and the Mole Man appeared, but their schemes were softened to avoid frightening younger viewers. Gone were the comic's philosophical overtones and moral ambiguity. Censors demanded constant edits. References to radiation, cosmic storms, and interdimensional travel were rewritten to sound harmless. When Doom appeared too menacing, NBC requested his lines be rewritten entirely. Some animators later confessed they felt they were illustrating a ghost of the real Fantastic Four stripped of its soul. Behind the scenes, Hanna-Barbera wrestled with Marvel's creative control. Storyboards changed daily. Voice actors were instructed to tone down emotion to keep the show pleasant. Despite early ratings success, the show ended after one season, leaving fans unsatisfied. Years later, lost episodes resurfaced through fan collections, restoring its reputation as a bold attempt constrained by fear. The Fantastic Four of 1967 stands today as a symbol of Marvel's growing pains, visionary heroes trapped inside cautious television. Number 13. Spider-Woman, 1979. Before modern audiences met Jessica Drew in blockbuster films, she quietly headlined one of Marvel's earliest solo animated series. Spider-Woman in 1979 was bold, mysterious, and far stranger than most viewers remember. Mixing superhero action with supernatural threats, the cartoon followed Jessica as she balanced magazine editing with battling creatures from ancient myth, cosmic invaders, and shadowy conspiracies that drifted far beyond Spider-Man's usual villains. The show carried a reputation for being unexpectedly eerie. Each episode blended noir shadows with psychedelic visuals, and Jessica's transformation sequences felt almost supernatural as she spun into costume while electricity crackled across the frame. This darker style drew both applause and complaints. Parents argued the monsters were too frightening, and some stations insisted on toning down occult imagery and replacing demonic symbols with generic shapes. Behind the scenes, the production was chaotic. Animators struggled with deadlines, while Marvel demanded that Jessica remain powerful, but never too violent. Several action scenes were softened or redrawn, removing energy blasts or physical strikes. Budget limitations forced the studio to reuse entire chase sequences, and Spider-Woman's flight animations appeared in almost every episode, leading to continuity glitches where backgrounds changed mid-motion. Despite the challenges, the series left a mark. It was one of Marvel's first attempts to portray a female hero as the central figure, long before the industry embraced such ideas. Though rarely streamed and often forgotten, Spider-Woman 1979 remains a fascinating glimpse into Marvel's willingness to experiment with tone, mood, and genre decades ahead of its time. Number 12. The New Fantastic Four, 1978. In 1978, Marvel revived the Fantastic Four for television, but with one bizarre twist: the Human Torch was missing. Rumors claimed he was banned because networks feared children might imitate lighting themselves on fire. The truth was less dramatic. Marvel did not own his animation rights at the time, so the studio replaced Johnny Storm with Herbie, the wisecracking robot, whose presence baffled longtime fans. Public reaction was confused. Some children adored the robot sidekick, while comic readers felt the show had lost its spark. The tone was lighter than the 1967 version, and the plots leaned into cosmic adventures with galactic scrolls and micro-worlds that stretched the limits of 70s animation. Yet the absence of the Human Torch cast a strange shadow over every episode, making it feel like a puzzle, with one missing piece. Behind the scenes, the production dealt with severe budget restrictions. Animators reused walk cycles and explosions across multiple episodes. Herbie's floating effect was created by simply erasing his legs and sliding him up and down the screen. Voice actors recorded multiple characters in marathon sessions, resulting in abrupt tonal shifts mid-scene. Despite these flaws, the series played a pivotal role in reviving interest in Marvel's first family. It kept the Fantastic Four alive in public memory and introduced a new generation to cosmic storytelling. Today, the new Fantastic Four is remembered fondly, not for perfection, but for courageously continuing the saga, even when key pieces were missing. Number 11. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, 1981. Few Marvel cartoons captured early 80s imagination like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. Airing in 1981, it brought together Spider-Man, Iceman, and Firestar, an original character created specifically for the show. Their headquarters, hidden inside a transforming apartment, became one of the most recognizable locations in Marvel animation history. The series enjoyed a reputation for warmth, humor, and bright superhero action, yet it flirted with darker themes. Some episodes dealt with mind control reality, bending villains, and apocalyptic futures. Stations worried about the intensity of certain stories, including the infamous episode where the X-Men appeared in a grim dystopian world dominated by Sentinels. Several broadcasts removed scenes considered too frightening for younger viewers. Behind the scenes, Marvel and NBC clashed constantly. Marvel pushed for more crossovers and complex storylines, while NBC demanded safer, kid-friendly plots. Animation budgets fluctuated wildly, producing episodes where characters moved fluidly one week and froze like cardboard the next. Firestar's flame effects were especially difficult to animate, leading producers to simplify her powers into glowing overlays. Even with its struggles, the show became a cornerstone of Marvel's animated legacy. It introduced millions of children to team dynamics, shared universes, and iconic guest heroes. Decades later, it remains one of the most beloved yet strangely forgotten pillars of Marvel's early television rise. Number 10. Iron Man, 1966. Iron Man's first appearance on television came through the Marvel Superheroes anthology in 1966, and it was as primitive as it was ambitious. Tony Stark's story of a wounded genius who builds a metal suit to save himself was unlike anything else on Saturday mornings. It was science fiction mixed with Cold War paranoia, yet told through static comic panels that barely moved. The series had one of the most memorable theme songs of its era, celebrating the invincible hero in red and gold. Kids loved it, but adults found the show unsettling. It depicted war technology and global espionage with surprising bluntness for a children's cartoon. Some episodes featured Stark designing weapons and fighting vaguely Asian armies that mirrored real-world conflicts. As the Vietnam War intensified, complaints began pouring in. Parents and teachers protested that the show was glorifying military industry and weapon creation. Censors demanded edits removing entire scenes of explosions and gunfire. Some broadcasters went as far as refusing to air certain episodes altogether. Behind the curtain production was a struggle. Budgets were microscopic, and animators reused Iron Man's flight cycle so often it became a running joke. Voice actors worked overtime recording dialogue for multiple shows at once. By the early 70s, Iron Man had disappeared from syndication entirely. Yet fans who rediscovered it decades later hailed it as the foundation of Marvel's cinematic future. It was crude, flawed, but visionary, showing that even in minimal motion, the idea of Iron Man was already ahead of its time. Number 9. The Incredible Hulk, 1966. When The Incredible Hulk debuted on the Marvel Superheroes block in 1966, few expected it to become one of the strangest and most striking interpretations of Marvel's Green Goliath. The show lifted its art directly from Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko's comic panels, creating a surreal, motion comic experience. Hulk's transformations were abrupt, his movements stiff, yet the raw power of the character somehow still crackled through the limited animation. Censors constantly monitored the show. They demanded softer sound effects for punches and removed several scenes where Hulk destroyed military vehicles. What made things worse was the Cold War atmosphere of the era episodes, showing Hulk confronting soldiers or government agencies were considered too aggressive for young viewers. Some stations even delayed broadcasts to edit out explosions. Behind the scenes, the production was a race against starvation-level budgets. Episodes were assembled in days, not weeks. Animators were instructed to animate only mouths and eyes while keeping the rest of the frame still. Despite these restrictions, kids were hypnotized. Hulk's booming narration and primal fury felt unlike anything else on television. By the early 70s, reruns faded and most prints deteriorated. Yet fans still defend this version as the earliest attempt to capture the monster's tragedy, a story told through still images that somehow still moved. Number 8. Captain America, 1966. He's fighting for freedom on the 7 seas. The Captain America cartoon of 1966 delivered one of the most unforgettable theme songs in superhero history and one of the most controversial animated series Marvel ever released. Its stories, pulled directly from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby comics, plunged straight into Cold War fears. Cap fought Hydra, communists, spies, and villains whose motives echoed real-world political tensions. Parents immediately complained. Some episodes featured firing squads, military coups, and enemies resembling actual foreign regimes. Broadcasters panicked. Scenes of Captain America throwing his shield at soldiers were cut or replaced with static frames. In some countries, the entire series aired with missing sequences. Behind the scenes, the production was barely held together. Voice actors doubled roles across multiple characters in the same episode. Animators reused walk cycles and shield-throwing loops endlessly, sometimes from completely unrelated storylines. Continuity errors popped up everywhere, characters suddenly changing costumes mid-scene or disappearing between frames. Yet the show captivated a generation. It made Captain America a household name long before live-action adaptations were possible. Today, surviving episodes are cherished for their boldness and for the unapologetically patriotic spirit that defined an era. Crude, yes, but also fearless, an animated time capsule born during a world gripped by tension. Number 7. Thor, 1966. The mighty Thor crushing the villain's plan. When Thor appeared on the Marvel Superheroes in 1966, it was the character's first leap off the comic page and into moving images. But moving is generous. Thor's animation was famously stiff, often limited to blinking eyes and sliding panels. Yet this limitation accidentally created a mythic aesthetic that fans still remember. Because the show adapted actual Stan Lee and Jack Kirby comic panels, it retained much of the grandeur of Asgard. The stories featured Loki, Odin, the Enchantress, and even the Stone Men from Saturn. For many children, this was their first encounter with Norse mythology, cosmic politics, and the poetry of Kirby's world-building. Censors kept a watchful eye. Thor's hammer blows were softened, lightning effects muted, and any implication of divine punishment was removed. Several episodes were edited to remove references to gods, replacing them with lighter fantasy terms. Still, networks worried that Thor's mythological roots were too religious for Saturday mornings. Behind the scenes, animators struggled to replicate Kirby's explosive style with microscopic budgets. Scenes of Mjolnir's flight were reused dozens of times. Some episodes were assembled entirely from existing panels with minimal new art. Even so, Thor's early cartoon became an icon. It preserved the raw, cosmic imagination of Marvel's early years at a time when TV animation dared very little. Number 6. The Marvel Action Hour, The Fantastic Four, 1994. Long before CGI dominated superhero storytelling, Marvel launched the Marvel Action Hour in 1994, featuring an ambitious but rocky reboot of the Fantastic Four. The first season became infamous for its campy tone, awkward dialogue, and bright toy-like colors. Critics dismissed it quickly, but children embraced its chaotic cosmic energy. The show found controversy early. Villains like Dr. Doom and Annihilus were portrayed with surprising intensity for Saturday mornings, and several episodes involving body horror transformations were forced into heavy edits. Some stations cut entire scenes involving alien invasions or collapsing cities, fearing they resembled real-world disasters too closely. Behind the scenes, the tension was palpable. Marvel pushed for comic accuracy, while networks pushed for softness. Animators reworked models repeatedly, and budgets forced them to recycle entire battles. Ben Grimm's transformations shifted from episode to episode due to inconsistent artwork, leaving fans confused. Only in the second season did the show find its footing with more dramatic, mature storytelling inspired by John Byrne's iconic run. Though overshadowed by later adaptations, the 1994 Fantastic Four remains a cult favorite. It bridged two eras of animation, showing Marvel's transition from campy experiments to more serious, serialized storytelling. Number 5. Silver Surfer, 1998. Marvel attempted something radically ambitious in 1998 with the Silver Surfer animated series. Using early digital paint and bold cosmic backdrops, the cartoon adapted Jack Kirby's most mythic creation with surprising philosophical depth. Children expecting light superhero adventures instead encountered stories about destiny, cosmic guilt, and universal destruction. The show quickly drew controversy. Its portrayal of Galactus devouring worlds and the Surfer's internal monologues about morality troubled parents. Several networks refused to air episodes involving planetary annihilation or cosmic warfare. International broadcasters edited out scenes of destruction, entirely leaving viewers confused by abrupt transitions. Behind the scenes, Marvel Animation struggled to keep up with its own ambition. The series relied heavily on experimental CGI, which often clashed with hand-drawn characters. Rendering delays forced animators to finish sequences with simplified effects. Contracts with toy companies further complicated things with demands for more kid-friendly designs that contradicted the show's solemn tone. Despite being canceled after one season, Silver Surfer remains one of Marvel's most artistic forgotten gems. It introduced cosmic lore to mainstream audiences long before blockbuster films dared to touch it. Today, fans regard it as a bold, surreal experiment years ahead of its time. Number 4. The Avengers United. They Stand. 1999. Before the world embraced cinematic Avengers, Marvel attempted a futuristic animated version in 1999. The Avengers United They Stand reimagined the team with armored suits, transforming gear, and high-tech upgrades that puzzled longtime fans but intrigued younger viewers. Its reputation was mixed. Some praised its ambition, while others criticized the lack of classic lineup characters like Iron Man and Captain America, who only appeared in cameos. Instead, the show focused on Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, Vision, Tigra, and Wasp battling robotic empires and time-traveling tyrants. The futuristic designs stirred controversy, and early promotional art triggered fan backlash. Behind the scenes, the production was turbulent. Toy companies demanded constant costume changes to push merchandise. Writers struggled to balance serialized arcs with child-safe storytelling. Animators reused transformation sequences, endlessly creating pacing issues and unintended humor. Censors removed several scenes involving Vision phasing through enemies, claiming it encouraged dangerous imitation. Though short-lived, the series played a vital role in keeping the Avengers brand alive during Marvel's financially troubled years. It remains a fascinating, forgotten stepping stone between the crude 60s experiments and the polished 21st century adaptations. Number 3. The Invincible Iron Man Motion Comic Series, 2010. In 2010, Marvel revived one of its oldest storytelling methods, the motion comic, and used it to reintroduce Iron Man in The Invincible Iron Man. Though not a traditional animated show, it functioned as a modern successor to the 1966 style, blending static comic panels with limited motion to create a hybrid viewing experience. The series explored Tony Stark's battles against espionage threats, rogue technologies, and inner turmoil with surprisingly mature tone. Viewers expecting high-speed animation instead found stylized motion sequences with sliding panels and heavy shadows reminiscent of Marvel's earliest televised experiments. This unusual approach divided audiences. Some praised its faithfulness to comic storytelling, while others criticized it for lacking fluid movement. Behind the scenes, Marvel embraced motion comics as a cost-effective way to produce serialized content during a financially restructuring era. Artists adapted comic art, directly altering lighting and color to create cinematic transitions. Voice actors recorded dialogue in tight sessions, resulting in moments where intensity shifted abruptly. Though overshadowed by blockbuster films, the motion comic remains an important forgotten branch of Marvel animation. It demonstrated that storytelling could thrive even in restrictive formats, echoing the resourceful spirit of the 1960s experiments. Number 2. The X-Men Unaired Segments, 1966. Long before the famous 1990s X-Men cartoon, Marvel created test segments for an X-Men adaptation as part of the 1966 Marvel Superheroes package. These were the earliest attempts to bring mutants to television, and they were promptly buried. The team featured Cyclops, Marvel Girl, Beast, Angel, and Iceman. Storyboards showed Sentinels, Magneto, and scenes straight from the early Stan Lee and Jack Kirby issues. But networks immediately rejected the concept. The idea of mutants frightened censors who believed children would interpret it as a metaphor for radiation exposure or genetic deformities, topics considered taboo in the Cold War era. There were also fears that the theme of persecution was too political, echoing real-world civil rights struggles. Sponsors warned Marvel that promoting a story about minorities being hunted could invite controversy. Animation never progressed beyond partial test reels. Surviving footage unearthed decades later shows stiff walk cycles, early character models, and fragments of battles. This forgotten attempt represents one of Marvel's most significant lost opportunities. Had the X-Men reached television in the 1960s, they might have become cultural icons decades earlier. Instead, the project was wiped clean from schedules, remembered only by collectors and studio archives. Number 1. The Marvel Superheroes. Prince Namor, 1966. While Namor appeared across the Marvel Superheroes anthology, he also received one of the most fully developed solo runs in the lineup. Prince Namor's 1966 animated segments became a haunting portrait of Marvel's earliest antihero. Yet today, few fans know they existed. The stories were taken directly from the comics. Atlantis at war, surface invaders, and Namor's struggle between two worlds. What made these segments unforgettable was their mood. The underwater backgrounds shimmered with eerie blue overlays. Namor's speeches about isolation and responsibility gave the show an emotional depth far beyond other segments. But this very seriousness caused trouble. Censors cut scenes involving sea battles, flooding, or destruction of surface cities. Some networks complained that Namor appeared too hostile toward humanity. Episodes involving atomic testing or pollution were softened to avoid controversy. Behind the scenes, animators struggled with underwater physics. Characters floated awkwardly, hair stayed impossibly still, and water currents were represented by looping blue lines. Yet, despite all limitations, Namor's presence was magnetic. These segments quietly disappeared from syndication by the early 70s, overshadowed by more popular heroes. But among historians, they survive as the earliest and most poetic attempt to animate Marvel's underwater kingdom. These forgotten animations were more than crude experiments, they were the first sparks of Marvel's visual universe. Each one carried raw imagination, censorship battles, and artistic ambition that modern fans rarely see. They were the studio learning how to dream with ink and motion. Which of these lost foundations surprised you the most? Tell us below. Hit subscribe and help revive the history that shaped every superhero we celebrate today.